Hello, and welcome to the Northwood Podcast. My name is Heath Jones, and I'm the pastor of Northwood Christian Church. And this podcast is a product of Northwood. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please visit our website at www.indyncc.org. That's www.ndncc.org. Or you can check us out on Facebook by typing in Northwood Christian Church and then the word Indianapolis to find the right one. And you should be able to find us with no trouble. Also, I should mention that this is a podcast that's produced by AllIndianaPodcastNetwork.com. All Indiana Podcast Network makes available dozens of Indiana-based or Indiana-themed podcasts, which you should check out at your leisure when you have the time. Today, we're going to be going over a passage in the Bible that's found in the Epistle of James, chapter 3, specifically verses 1 through 12. And we won't read it in total for time's sake, but we will be touching on a verse here or there. But here's the gist, and perhaps you've read it before. The Epistle of James in the 3rd chapter makes the case that our tongue, our words, are like the rudder of a ship. A metaphor that's meant to emphasize the point that we can create wonderful things with our words, steering the ship in life-giving directions, or we can steer the ship into a quagmire, into a whole mess to the destruction of the ship. Or we can build up a life with our words, encouraging someone who needs to hear words of hope, or conversely, we can tear down a life and speak poison into the life of another. And today's episode is all about words. And we'll get to that in a moment, but first, here are some ads. And we're back. And this passage, from the onset, has me worried. For you see, it begins with some words of warning for teachers, such as myself. The words go, verse 1, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness." And this has me feeling very careful, wondering if I'm fit for the task. For you see, we preachers and teachers often do get it wrong. And usually by the time that I've discovered that I'm wrong, it's too late. I've already disseminated the misinformation. I've already planted the bad idea into another person's head, an idea that is either askew or completely dangerous. And I've learned through the years that words are very valuable things, but dangerous things, but also capable of creating life, seemingly out of thin air, but also capable of tearing someone down. So I try to do my best to teach, and if any get upset, I try to help them understand that I never meant any harm. At least that's what I say when I gossip. I justify it. Never meant any harm. Or when I give a critique, or when I sow seeds of anxiety. And every now and again, I'll tell someone exactly what I think of them, and I call it just being honest. Telling the truth in love on a good day, but on other days, telling the truth perhaps just to put someone where I think their place should be. And on every other day, just telling the truth. I sometimes think that it's fine for me to call it like it is and then to cut my losses. For all of us make many mistakes, as the text reads. And anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, says James in the 2nd verse, able to keep the whole body in check as with a bridle. And if this describes you, I mean, wow, congratulations. If you are perfect at keeping your words just so, the right word for the right occasion, or no words when none are necessary. But for the rest of us, we do well to consider the words that follow. The tongue, says James, is like a bridle or a bit, like you'd put in a horse's mouth. It sends the animal in one direction or another, and sometimes it may lead the animal to green grass and to cool waters, or it might lead the animal to some nasty place, a dangerous place that causes it harm. But then it goes on. The tongue is like the rudder of a ship, writes James. Ships are very large and difficult to move, and yet a very small rudder can effect drastic or astounding changes for those in the boat. And once I learned this in a very visceral way when I was on a boat with my cousins, and the oldest cousin, being the oldest, let the youngsters know that it was our job to row and then he'd steer. And things went well for a while, but eventually my cousin thought it a good idea to steer the boat into the part of the pond where we all knew the snakes liked to hide. At least that's what our older cousin had told us, that it was all full of snakes. And we didn't really know, but that was enough to make us anxious. So we rowed in the only sensible direction, away from the snakes. We rowed as hard as we could away from the danger, but it did not really matter in the end because my eldest cousin held the oar that served as the rudder, just a small little rounded board, but with it he was able to steer our little ship into danger in spite of our best efforts. Then crash into snakes. The rudder rules the day on a boat. James says that the tongue is like a rudder, and if we allow the ship to stand in as a symbol for a community or a church, boy, ain't it the truth. How often have pastors and lay leaders tried to steer their church, which they love very much, in the right direction, but a few voices speak enough fear, anger, anxiety, or gossip into the community that the ship finds itself heading for unsafe, uncertain places. So also the tongue, writes James, is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. Verse 5. Now lately, I've been trying to carefully manage the words I direct at my children. One word spoken in anger or without thought could guide and direct their future paths. Just words, but with powerful effect. I was told a story of a child whose father generally treated him well until he drank. And when this happened, his father would usually berate his son verbally, insulting him, naming his flaws. And the child, now a man, told the story this way. He said, once when Dad was drinking and tearing me down with words, he said that he'd wished I'd never been born. And I said, Dad, you don't mean that. And his eyes cleared for a bit, and he said, a drunken man's words are a sober man's thoughts. The fire that those words sparked still burns so far as that young man is concerned. James writes, verses 5 and 6, how great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body. It sets on fire the cycle of nature and is itself set on fire by hell. Have you ever been a part of a community torn apart by words? Politicians know what this is about. Wrong words spoken at the wrong time can ruin a career, but it can also ruin a life. Who can guess the number of lives our reckless words have, if not ruined, at least affected in unpredictable ways? We use our words so often and with such little forethought. I shudder to think what my own words have done. Recently, I ran across this story about a 16th century saint, Saint Philip of Neri, and he assigned a villager an act of penance for their sin of spreading gossip. And it was this: take a pillow to the top of the church tower, cut it open, and let the feathers spread all over the place, blown away in the wind. And then came the instructions: collect the feathers. Now, of course, you know that this is an impossible task, which is the point that St. Philip was trying to make in order to underscore the destructive nature of gossip. When we detract from others in our speech, our malicious words are scattered abroad and cannot be gathered back. You cannot put them back. They continue to dishonor and divide for days, months, and years after you've spoken those words. They hang around in people's minds. They are remembered, and then they are passed on from one talebearer to the next by form of gossip. And this story is a great metaphor and sobering reminder to all of us flamethrowers out there that the damage caused by our words is real and very difficult to manage and heal in the aftermath. As James writes in verses 7 and 8, for every species of beast and bird or reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue. a restless evil full of deadly poison. So this is not good. It's not good at all. For if the tongue can only do harm, and if it can't be tamed, what hope is there? Why speak at all? What hope is there for you and me and our flamethrower mouths, or hope for our communities that are torn apart by the words we say? But it goes on. And I find relief in the following words. For here, James lays out the hint of, if not the hint of, the direct path towards an alternative way. He writes at the back half of verse 8 and on through verse 12, as we already touched on, no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison, all too true. But it goes on, with it, with the tongue, we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, writes James, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. So apparently, if you can read between those lines, the tongue isn't all bad. While it is true that sometimes our tongue is used to curse someone made in the likeness of God, which is to suggest that in a way, when we tear down someone with our words, we are tearing down God. Think about that for a minute. The next time you say some biting words to someone, you may just as well be saying those words to God. But just as it is true that sometimes our words are used to curse, as we read in verse 10, we read that the tongue is also used to praise God in every good thing that comes from God. From the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. James really comes to the point at the end of verse 10. Brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Which implies that we can envision another way. How if it were different? How if we did not use our words to tear down one another? How if we replaced words that tear down with words that build up? How if we were hyper aware of the fact that whilst our words can spark a fire of devastation, they can also serve as a foundation of life? I can remember those words spoken into my life at various times, words that gave me a great sense of self-worth, words that named the good that another was able to see in me, a good I could not see for myself until it was named and spoken aloud. We must be very careful with our tongues. If we are paying attention, we will be able to replace words of anger with, at the very least, silence when we have no good words, or at best, words of love, replacing words of slander and gossip with words that upbuild and encourage. And please hear me. Replace words of anxiety with words of hope. There is great anxiety in these times, and we need words of hope more than ever. Words of anxiety and fear close possibilities, close the doors on futures that would be better if they were spoken aloud into existence by words of hope. So what if the worst happens, we say? What if we fail? What if we lose it all? And words like these keep us entrapped in fear and unable to move forward. Instead, let's frame our futures in words of hope. And yes, we are facing an uncertain future, but how if something remarkable and unexpected happens that we can name aloud and see come alive? How if we discover new life on the other side of what's next that we never saw coming? Words of hope may well lead us to paths to life. So let's be careful with how we use our words, at the very least. Words that tear down and on purpose. Well, those sorts of words are obviously wrong and destructive, and we should, as James goes on and on about, bless and not curse. That means that gossip's just got to go. Gossip is an unholy and dangerous thing. It's named multiple times in the scriptures as an especially destructive sin. So I think now is the time when we should each repent of the ways that our words have hurt others. For who is perfect? A rhetorical question I've come to see. I'm certainly not perfect, and I'd bet that some of you are right there with me. So what is next? I've named words of hope, words that build up. I think truth-telling in the name of love will also move us some distance in the right direction. Face-to-face truth-telling with no guile or bad intentions in mind. Only health and well-being in mind when we name the truth. No triangulating, no useless conversations about someone else when they are not around. Instead, speaking the truth to the one who needs to hear it and in love. And sometimes you can't, and this leads us to a place where we speak no words at all, but rather deal patiently in love. But when we do speak, build them up. Speak words of life and hope. Speak words that name potential and possibilities in the face of uncertainty and fear. Small sparks that can produce great fires. And sometimes life-giving, warm, wholesome fires. Fires that do not destroy, but fires that lead to life. Small spark, great fire. And at this point, I don't know if I have to say it again, but I'll say it anyway. Brothers and sisters, please, for the sake of your life and ours, use your tongue to build up and to spark life. A whole lot is at stake, but a life-giving word might just transform a whole life or even a whole church. Let's speak words of life over words of death as best as we are able. And who knows how things will go when we do. This has been the Northwood Podcast. If you're interested in listening to more, please check out our previously recorded episodes, or please subscribe or follow the Northwood Podcast by way of whatever app you access them. In the meantime, please check out our website at www.indncc.org or look us up on Facebook by searching for Northwood Christian Church, Indianapolis. Until next time, be well.